On yesterday's show, we talked about this rapidly brewing narrative that maybe the special counsel, Robert Mueller, maybe he needs to be fired. And that sort of, I thought, came out of nowhere, considering all the compliments that had been thrown Mueller's way, that all of a sudden you had all these right-wingers, including Newt Gingrich and others, saying, oh, really shady though, don't listen to what I said before, don't trust my lying tweets, he might need to go. And what do you know? Yesterday, just a couple of hours after our initial coverage of that, suddenly from a Trump friend, sounds like Mueller might not be long for this investigation, which you're gonna see in this video.
Believe that the president is seriously considering getting rid of Bob Mueller, and why do you think that?
I think it's a consideration the president has had because Mueller is illegitimate as special counsel. Chris, remember, there is no evidence of wrongdoing. There's no evidence of collusion. There's no evidence of obstruction.
I don't understand what this newfound disparagement is about.
I have no disparagement for Bob Mueller.
You just said he's illegitimate as special counsel. That's not nice.
Correct. But I said as a man, you asked, I'm saying as a man, I think he did a great job running the FBI.
As a man, he's great, but get rid of his ass, he's illegitimate. Well, who's speaking then if not the man himself? So that is apparently a close friend and occasional confidant of Donald Trump. He's considering it. And the response from the White House was sort of a non-denial denial. And Rosenstein, who testified earlier today, was asked whether he has confidence in Mueller's integrity and in his investigation. He said yes. The follow-up question was, does the president have confidence in him? I don't know. Well, that's not a good sign. Ask James Comey about that. And so that gets a little bit suspicious, but it's interesting that it's been sort of backed up by some other Republicans. So in this next video, you're gonna see Paul Ryan blaming not all the Republicans that are now bad-mouthing Mueller, but the media for this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, all I've heard so much are rumors, but I think in the best case for the president is to be vindicated by allowing this investigation to go on thoroughly and independently. So I think the best advice would be to let Robert Mueller do his job.
One, did you convey your opinions to the president on Mr. Mueller that you should just let the investigation continue? If the president does
What's that?
go ahead and let Mr. Mueller go,
there's no debate that's going on here. You're saying this?
You're creating a debate that's not happening.
Yeah, this is. I heard this is like a rumor we heard last night. So there's really not some big debate that's occurring on this.
would Congress be interested in re-upping the special counsel?
You're creating, like I said, Kevin just met it. You're creating a debate that's not occurring here. This is something that I think was a rumor that came out last night. So
and healthcare, and you're creating a rumor that's not happening.
We are focused on solving people's problems. What I think the American people want to know is that their government's working.
We would like to know that, and I look forward to the days when it does. So you know you're dealing with a prepared talking point when they say the exact same words 3 times in a row there. So it's not all these newfound Republican critics, it's not Newt Gingrich, it's not a friend of Trump saying that he's considering dismissing or firing Mueller. It's all on the media, which was undercut slightly by, I would have to say, one of the most respectable politicians on the Republican side. Let's take a look at this.
I had no idea how dirty this mess was involving Comey and Mueller over the years. And Comey manipulated through this leaking to get a special counsel when we don't need one. We know now for sure there is no collusion between this administration and Russia. Let's at least stop that facade. Let's stop that distraction. Get rid of Mueller. He is dirty. He created all kinds of problems.
Get rid of him, he's dirty. He's caused all kinds of problems. I couldn't tell you what he's done other than the fact that he's hired some people. He's caused all these problems.
All kinds of problems.
He's off in a room with a desk somewhere. I have no idea what he's doing. I don't think you do either.
It's gotten so blatant. He's caused all kinds of problems for this president and his administration. He's disrupting all the things they're trying to do without anyone finding out. What is he, like some kind of special investigator? Who hired this guy? Somebody get rid of him. You know he's about to disrupt everything that we're trying to do here.
Yeah, now look, so a lot of people very worried that theoretically Trump might take what should be an unthinkable step in firing the special counsel that's investigating him right now for obstruction of justice. thereby committing obstruction of justice to stop the investigation into obstruction of justice. It's justiceception, I've termed it.
I'm actually mostly surprised to find out that Louis Gohmert is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who keeps revving these things up in the media, because he has his own show.
That's true.
He has a podcast. I think he's part of the network. Am I right?
Yeah. And look, it would be, I think, as a lot of people have pointed out, it should be unthinkable if he were to fire him. A president cannot shut down investigations into his own illegal behavior. I think most people get how terrible that would be, that's obviously grounds for impeachment at that point. Whether it could ever happen under the Republican Congress, obviously is a different question. But think about that. Like, first of all, how much must he be hiding if he's willing to do something that theoretically might be unconstitutional and shutting this down to stop the investigation? You do not take those steps if you have nothing to hide. But then, again, to appeal to the people who theoretically don't care about this investigation, the sorts of crimes he's committing in terms of corruption, the massive amounts of money that he's ready to hand off to his real estate buddies, amongst others, federal contractors and all that. What's going to happen if we try to investigate wrongdoing there? Is he going to fire those special investigators? I think that this would be setting an incredibly dangerous precedent, an illegal precedent.
He's the only person who thinks doing this wouldn't look horrible.
Yeah, I mean, just like the firing of James Comey.
It's just to double it up and then to see this as a pattern for how he gets out of things, he would miss that completely.
You would think, yes. Now, supposedly Rosenstein, who would be the person with the legal authority to fire Mueller, said this morning in his testimony that he wouldn't do that unless there was good cause. But he also thereby, by saying that, says that theoretically if there was a good cause, we might have to fire him, which I guess that makes sense. But what is the good cause that would justify shutting down this investigation? They've come up with all these arguments that theoretically someone he hired 7 years ago, 10 years ago, donated $3,000 to a Democrat. I got news for you. Any DC lawyer has contributed to one of the two parties. If a contribution makes it invalid that you could be involved in this investigation, you'll never have an investigation. And back when Ken Starr was investigating Bill Clinton's behavior, those guys had donated to Republicans. I don't remember a lot of these guys raising issues with that then, and there are 100. They were around back then to raise those objections if they had them. Odd that they didn't.
What's in TYT membership? Not gonna tell you. Only one way to find out, tytnetwork.com/join.